Hi, I'm Norman Beer from Carnegie Mellon's Open Learning Initiative. So, as you've seen, open educational resources have demonstrated exceptional potential in the classroom, both for supporting learners and for supporting educators. But I'm actually here to talk to you about something slightly different. And that is a secret OER superpower at the institutional level. The ability to sidestep the Gordian's knot of a university IP policy. Universities' intellectual property policies are rarely things that are drafted in a timely and cohesive way. More often, they're going to grow organically. The combined work of faculty, administration, and OGC committees as they simultaneously interpret existing precedents and to attempt changes in the landscape, with each of these groups attempting to protect their own interests. So this means that IP policies are well known for being Byzantine, convoluted legal documents, and yet they're often behind the times for addressing current approaches and challenges. This mess was brought home to me recently as colleagues and I attempted to award some internal seed grants at CMU for educational innovation. We literally ended up needing to create a flowchart that we could trace out for each grant. So, were federal funds involved? If so, which agency? If it was NSF funding, was the funding before or after the Bayh-Dole Act? Were there university resources used, and if so, was such use substantial? If substantial CMU resources were used, did the university make a claim on the IP at the time of award? And so on. And the thing is, Carnegie Mellon isn't known for having a particularly nasty IP policy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's considered to be pretty straightforward and fair for faculty. So, most IP policies are designed to cover new inventions and technologies that are developed at the institution with the goal of ensuring that both faculty and the institution have a fair stake in any research outputs. And they're often overlaid with an equally complex set of traditions, processes, and informal understandings. One of these relates to any educational materials that an educator makes on her own time, and these are covered by traditional rights. So the notes, slides, assessments, and assignments that an educator makes remains their own. And up until fairly recently, this was a pretty straightforward state of affairs. What's changed? Well, new innovations in education have made the process a little more complicated. I'll give you one example. Here at the Open Learning Initiative, faculty are working to develop comprehensive and fairly complex learning environments and courseware. Developing this courseware requires substantial commitments, but those commitments aren't just from faculty. It's from a larger development team. And that team's going to include instructional designers, technologists, visual designers, learning engineers, project managers, psychometricians, and some learning scientists. Supporting all of this work is a larger infrastructure, tools and technology for delivering the courseware, supporting learners and faculty, and then iteratively improving on the materials as time goes by. So while faculty are clearly bringing expertise in creating materials of the type that we would usually associate with traditional rights, the end courseware is truly a collaborative product, and it's one that's made with a substantial investment on the part of CMU in the form of the OLI team and infrastructure. Who owns this work? So, at many institutions, the challenge of developing this kind of online courseware was solved by specifically paying faculty, frequently adjunct faculty, to develop online materials with a contract that's going to explicitly assign all IP ownership to the institution. This ensures that the university can keep on using the materials, but it dramatically limits what faculty can do with the materials, especially if they teach at more than one institution. But full IP ownership on the part of the faculty, which might seem fair, is also problematic, right? Institutions are making pretty substantial investments into developing these kinds of educational resources, and they want to guarantee that their students are going to have ongoing access to the work, no matter where faculty land. OLI's approach often means that multiple faculty are involved in the initial and ongoing development efforts, and this is going to further complicate the question of ownership. So who owns when you've got a larger team working together? And ideally, we want these materials to be used and improved upon over multiple course offerings. And these use contributions and improvements by many parties over many iterative cycles ends up creating new challenges. Who owns the final work? Who's allowed to change it? Who can give permission for others to use or change it? To complicate things even further, OLI, like some open educational efforts, has started to incorporate student-generated content into some of our courses. Student IP rights are going to add another dimension to what's already a complex landscape. So this isn't a hypothetical question. Over the past few months here at OLI, we've seen 3 new course development efforts that have combined faculty effort and materials with a substantial investment on the part of the university, and have added in occasional contributions from the students and a host of open questions. Who owns this final work? How can we ensure that the faculty authors can continue to use this courseware, no matter what their position or their institution? How can we ensure that the university can continue to benefit from these materials and guarantee that the access is there for future students and faculty? How can we ensure that future grant teams can extend, modify, and improve upon this work? How can we leverage this work in future research and grant submissions? So, one option is to create some type of special, non-exclusive use license that ensures all parties have continued access. But most of the time, these types of licenses are one-offs. They're going to require special consideration, and this ends up opening the door to pretty extensive, sometimes adversarial negotiations between OGC and faculty. Drafting the agreements often takes longer than the act of developing the courseware itself, and it frequently creates a set of legal complexities that make subsequent use and modification challenging. In the end, though, most of the parties that we're talking about are less concerned with who owns the IP than what they can do with the course materials. On the part of educators, they're concerned about getting appropriate credit for their work, want to make sure that they have the ability to keep on using the materials they've authored, they want to ensure that the resources are portable for use at different institutions, and most of the time they're concerned about the potential for easy and ongoing collaborations. On the institutional side, they want to make sure that they get the full benefit of the investment that they're making into courseware. Want to make sure students have access to these materials over the long term, and that they're able to position the materials for future development and improvement. Finally, on the part of General Counsel and the Office for Sponsored Projects, they want to make sure that they've got clarity for the rights for future grants and other uses, and ideally they'd like there to be some simplicity in the access and use, both across the faculty and across institutions. One solution for this? Well, try the Creative Commons license. When the primary driver of concerns is less about ownership, more about ongoing use and access, open licensing offers an exceptionally straightforward way to address the needs of all parties and to accommodate future concerns. Most of the educators that I've worked with have quickly seen the immediate benefit of licensing the materials they're developing as OER, even when they're less concerned with the larger agenda and benefits of the open education movement. And I'm pretty fortunate that after a decade and a half of working with the Open Learning Initiative, both our OGC and our OSP teams have gained some experience with and trust in Creative Commons licensing. So, frequently, we posit the 5 R's of open education as being of central benefit to learners or to classroom instructors. But in fact, this ability to retain, to reuse, to revise, to remix, and to redistribute are also of equal concerns to institutions, to the administrators, to the legal teams, to our course development teams, and to the faculty that need to engage with them. OER can actually simplify what are otherwise very complicated questions of use and ownership, and do so in a way that really addresses concerns of all parties. And if cutting through red tape, simplifying the lives of you and your colleagues, and all the while supporting a greater good via contributions to the commons isn't a superpower, I don't know what is. So a quick note for those of you that are watching this as part of an edX Open Education MOOC. I wanted to note that there's been some fabulous research suggesting that watching videos like this one are actually one of the worst ways for you to learn. Much more effective is for you to engage in rich learn-by-doing activities. Hopefully, the Siemens-Wiley team that's instructing you are going to have some great activities lined up. But in case they don't, I have some homework for you. When you've got a moment, look up your institution's IP policies and think about some of the questions that I've raised. Are traditional rights still being protected at your institution? How do these online materials factor in? Is your institution making investments in building better course materials? And if so, how are faculty being assured of the right to continue to use the materials that they author? How's your institution ensuring that both your learners and educators can make continued use of these resources? What happens at your institution if multiple educators and development teams want to expand upon and improve materials, especially over an extended period of time, potentially years? Perhaps most importantly, how can an open approach simplify these concerns at your institution while also making a larger contribution to the commons? I hope you found this interesting. If you've got questions, comments, maybe some howls of disbelief and derision, I hope that you'll let me know. You can find me on Twitter @NormanBeer. Thanks.